or you have to reflect.
I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm gonna just- Go ahead and get started. Plan for today. Start thinking about planning and practicing some planning, action plans. Using backward design. To practice writing objectives and reminder that your classroom, teaching our students to report to students. And some people already met that. Learning objectives for today, we'll do those. So what does this mean to teach with intentionality? Yeah. Yeah. Practice. Yeah, so I think it's really thinking about, particularly when you think about planning, right? Why we do a certain activity or why we use a certain tool, right? Why we create a certain kind of bulletin board, right? Everything that we are doing in our classroom is really intentional and we're doing it with purpose and we're thinking about that before we do it. And so, right, it has to do with goals and standards and all of those things. So thinking about kind of the foundations of planning, your textbook actually has this outline, which I think is nice in this little part. And what do you notice here? What are the aspects of planning that are important? Hi. Okay. We're just looking at what do we notice about this? Organization is really important. So for me, I think it's really right thinking about that preparation too and understanding who your students are, right? Really knowing that. So that's why things like formative assessment are really important. We need to know where our students are at and where they're starting in order for us to be able to plan accordingly and to plan with intention for those students. Right, in addition to all those, some of the other things that we were saying, right? Thinking about goals, planning standards, thinking about the instructional approaches that we want to take, organization of all of those things is really important. Right, and again, like thinking about this idea of building development in and always thinking about development and having development top of mind. And so the book talks about all these kind of different ways in which children think about and develop in their kind of thinking about and engagement in learning. So, right, we always start with things that children know, right? This idea of like thinking about these kind of concrete experiences, these hands-on experiences, we always start with that. Right? And then we move to these more kind of abstract ideas. So all of these are kind of essentially, right, getting to this idea that we start with this child's, right? Like when you think about teaching social studies, right? You always think about, it starts with the child, right? You think about their identity, them building that identity, and then you start kind of branching out, right? So you start thinking about their family, their community, their neighborhood, right? And then you build out. So all of these ideas, right, and thinking about moving from concrete to symbolic, and that we need to be thinking about that when we're thinking about planning. Obviously, instructional approaches. So we've talked about some of these things and thinking about all of these kind of more adult directed to more child centered. And then all of these other things that we've talked about, right? So, you know, centers and blended learning models, project approach, group work. So one thing I really want to drive home is that alignment is really important. And so as you start going into some of your other like methods classes and things, and you're writing, you'll be writing lessons in here, we'll be practicing that. But really thinking about how you're aligning those big goals, those like big unit goals or whatever they might be, your lesson goals, with your standards, your objectives, your assessment, right? All of those things should be really interrelated and they should all be aligned. And so just, it'll take practice and kind of getting to that point where you're really building that alignment across all of those areas. We'll start practicing some of that today. And so backward design is my favorite way of planning. I think I mentioned before that this isn't necessarily the way that we plan the GCOE lesson. It kind of is. But we'll break it apart in this class so that we can start looking at backward design and using that in a way to kind of, build the long lesson plan. Really favorite class. But so backward design is essentially this kind of 3-step process with lots of smaller tasks embedded. But really focus on those big desired, what we call desired results or learning goals. And then from there, you start thinking about your standard alignment, your objectives, and your assessments. And then you actually plan your actual lesson activities, right? So what those things the things you're going to do in your class to ensure that you're meeting those learning objectives. So in traditional approaches, sometimes we don't do that, right? Sometimes we plan, like we think about activities that sound fun to teach kids about, the weather or something. And then we start kind of integrating all of these other areas. But when we think about intentionality in our teaching, it's really important that we start with these kind of bigger goals and objectives. So, so step one, right? Thinking about your desired results. Think about what students are really expected to learn over time. So your desired results are really broad, right? It's like one step at a time. It's gonna be slow going, getting there. It might be several weeks that you're doing a lesson, or you're focused that you have a unit, right? And you have many lessons, and you're focusing on that desired result which includes many other objectives. And so obviously grade level, content area, all that curriculum is kind of out. So your curriculum that you get if you work at CPS, right, is going to help you with some of these things. And then obviously objectives, those are the things that are really going to help us get to our goals. And so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at the Skyline curriculum. How many of you have seen this? Great. So if you teach at CPS, you will, and I imagine other curriculums are going to be similarly formatted, but you're going to see these kind of overarching course descriptions, right? And then you'll have all your individual lessons. And so this is a kindergarten math course. So this course description is essentially everything that students will be able to do in kindergarten. So by the end of kindergarten, we're going to be doing all of these things. So I've highlighted some of these kind of big ideas here, thinking about them being able to describe their attributes, understand the relationship between numbers and quantities, right? So all of that stuff, those are kind of your desired results, right? Those big goals, the big things that they will be able to accomplish after kindergarten. Does that make sense? So those are all broad. And so here is unit 1, right, of that same course. So kindergarten math, unit 1 is shapes and numbers. So I want you to just take a minute and turn to your, neighbor or your small groups in your area, and read through this, right? And think about these questions, right? How does this kind of unit, this is just the intro, right? It's just kind of giving you the overview of what this unit is about. How does it align with some of those desired results on the previous slide? And then, yeah. And then, yeah, can we think about, are there other kinds of desired results maybe embedded in here that weren't listed? So take a couple of minutes just in small groups and turn to your neighbors. We'll just come back and discuss. Once you've read through it, turn to your neighbor and you read through this. You want me to put the other bit slide? That's not the one right before it. Yeah. First one, the identify, describe, rescue, and complete. And the first one is the number. With those two are the more appreciated. So
Yeah, just like you can do the part.
So what does everyone think here? How does this relate to the desired results? What you brought here?
Well, I was saying that my class observation this week was
yeah. Oh, great.
Yes, it was kindergarten. So
Perfect.
So the funniest thing is that, like, you know, like I'm old already, so I don't remember what did I do when I was in pre-K. They would think that with flashcards and like so they had flashcards from 1 to 20.
Okay.
But then in the 1-digit number, she had like apples, plastic apples.
Mhm.
And then that was the way then, you know, they started, they started doing like, adding. And, with the additions, got really excited and like, what I wanted to do is doing this.
Mhm.
Sometimes you make your unit plan. But then depending on the level of the kids, like the knowledge, you
Mhm.
can move forward and start expanding. Like, you know, whatever you have to do.
Right.
So like, she was like, I didn't know that it was like, you know, this far, because again, it was like, last time that I was doing, that was already once a week, but in that, like, I was surprised, this is for like, you know, 5 years old. They were really.
Yeah, I mean, they know how to do that, especially if you give them something concrete, right?
Yeah.
Give them something to count with.
And then, yeah.
Creating like sets and putting numbers and putting groups together, right, to add.
That's what they did. She did, they worked on the family, they worked in group. And, they worked in like, you know, like the center with like everybody talking about the flashcard.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so other thoughts? I think, right, this is talking about like number, obviously, right? Which, so if we go back, so if you think about describing and comparing attributes, thinking about, right, relationship between numbers.
That's a lot of things. Thinking about those all calendar, yeah, like all students, how do you play all this shapes, what their environments as they go look around.
Right, so I would even say, right, so this expansion here, right, there's a whole element of kind of the social science that's not reflected in the math unit necessarily, or the math kind of course in that description that we saw earlier. That's providing it's both providing context for where that learning of math is happening, maybe, right? But it's also another kind of content area that you can also integrate when you're teaching, you know, about shapes and numbers, right? So you can think about, so when you think about content integration, right, you can think about the social science piece, thinking about your community, right? Going on walks outside, creating maps maybe, or at home, right? So there's all of this other like content that's there, the social science content, that's a part of that. And so I think, right, so when you get a curriculum, you're going to get something that's, you know, a base focus on math or science or social studies, right? But think about those content integration areas, because the way you plan to teach these lessons can look however you want, really, right? So then obviously every unit, right? So every unit within the curriculum for guidance has its its own set of objectives and standards. Right, so it's the whole unit, right? And a unit is something that you're gonna teach over time. It's gonna be several weeks usually. So these objectives and these standards are then kind of more refined and split out by the lesson. So. Right, so this is unit 1, lesson 1, within that same math course for kindergarten. And so this lesson is about noticing attributes. So when we think about number, we think about, and you don't need to know all that, but we'll talk about that. Next semester, that's right. But noticing attributes, right, is a way that you might talk about shapes, right? So a shape has, a shape that has 4 sides, right? What kind of shape is that, right? That's an attribute of the shape. Number is an attribute, right? When we're counting something. So this is the lesson 1 standard. So this is the objective that you would focus on in that first lesson of that big whole unit that you're taking on now. And so any questions about that kind of quick overview? We're going to do some activities to think more deeply about some of these things, but I just want you to see on the framing of curriculum as it is doing it with ECED. One, note that it's there to use, right? And it has a lot of associated material. So when you are a teacher, particularly in ECED or any other area, you will have curriculum that will come with additional material. But often there's things embedded in those curriculums that are not necessarily apparent in the way that they're described, right? So the social sciences that you just saw, right? So think about content integration, think about ways you can incorporate those objectives throughout your day, right? Because there's all kinds of, your day is not just teaching, right? In a really kind of direct way, you're planning activities for your students. There's all this transitional time. There's, the time where they come in and putting things away. So how can you use some of the curriculum objectives in just your planning of like the day, right? Because this is just added learning for your students that's really going to reinforce, particularly like math, where maybe you don't have as much time as like English language arts, which is usually the big focus, right, in school. So any questions about that? Is it helpful to see the Skyline curriculum? I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by it, because it's a lot. I mean, you can go in, so I encourage you to explore what you can through Sky. So you can just Google CPS Skyline curriculum. You can see kind of all of the, right, like all the content areas. And then within those content areas, you can see the kind of breakdown by grade and kind of what those big ideas are that they're learning about. Some areas you might be able to see some dig a little bit more deeply. Some you have to have a CPS login. So if you work at CPS or you have a kid at CPS, you can use those. If you know someone at CPS, maybe they'll let you take a peek. But I think it's just helpful, right, to see kind of what that curriculum looks like. And how that's laid out. We will now, right, transition to our own way of writing lessons and thinking about lesson planning in the College of Ed here. And that means breaking it down. We're going to break it down into smaller bits. And you'll see how all those other things in the styling curriculum come back into our plans. So writing objectives, which obviously once we have our big desired result, the thing that we want, right, the big unit goals that we want to achieve, we need to start thinking about standards and objectives. And so one thing is, how do we write an objective? Has anyone heard of this method of writing an objective? Yeah? Tell me what you tell us.
Like, I don't know what the degree was like.
Yeah.
100%. This is and then condition,
Right.
how it would be like in partners, in groups, and everything. And then
I usually do, I think I did this one with the other ones, which is like,
Okay.
ELL kindergarten students will be able to, with help, to do something with help, yeah, the classmate, and with 100%.
Right. Right, so, yes, you want to include your audience, right? So that obviously is like your students. So your audience will generally always be the students, my students. There will be some behavior, right, that they're going to elicit some kind of, and this is where Bloom's taxonomy comes into play. So and so we're thinking about that kind of behavioral indicator, that action verb that we want to see our students demonstrate, right? So this needs to be something that we can see them do, right? I see a lot of objectives that are written kind of more passive, where we just say like they'll understand something, right? And how do I know how do I measure that, right? What is the thing that they're going to be doing to demonstrate that they understand something? Right, then there's these like conditions, right? What are they going to be doing with help? Using these, using counting bears, they will, create two different sets based on color, right? And the degree, so I don't agree with like having the degree of, because it's essentially saying like, right, we want them to do this 100% of the time, right? Or maybe 75% of the time is okay. So that's essentially your grade, right? And so when we do it, because that's like what the college grad wants us to teach about writing the degree. So we can do that. But I think like this to me is this is the least important category. Those categories, very important. Make sure that, you have all of those written out. And so here's Bloom's taxonomy, which will be a super helpful tool for you as you're writing objectives for this course, and then all of your other methods classes where you're going to be writing lesson plans. And what is really important to think about is what kind of category of objective of learning do you want your students to achieve? Do you want them to just be able to like know something, right? So they can just like tell me, they can just like repeat it back, right? Or do you really want them to develop these like deeper skills, these higher order things, right? And we want them to be doing all of those things. It's essentially what we need to achieve, right? And we build on that, right? Maybe we want them to just repeat something back to us and do it several times so we know that they get it, right? And then we build activities that help them really get to these other areas. So they're really synthesizing it, they're applying it in other contexts or in other activities. And so, it kind of all builds each other. And obviously over, this whole span, you're getting these kind of higher order thinking, which we want to see. And so that's the handout that you all have, is something similar to that. Okay, so let's think about, this is our objective that we just saw. Noticing attributes. So the objective here is describe similarities and differences among items in a set. So let's think about how we can improve this objective based on what we just talked about. Using the ABC rule. And then thinking about kind of where each of these objectives are within Bloom's taxonomy. Right? Are they in this kind of like or lower, remembering, understanding levels? Are they down here? So take a few minutes in your, turn to your groups, however you want to get together. And just look at them. And we're going to do a lot more prep. So we're just going to do this together. And then we'll have some time to kind of go around the room and do some more. So give it. How long?
Like somebody,
Your thoughts are-
if you put them on the next item set would be, so for sure they're evaluating, they're analyzing. What do you think? Okay, so what do you think?
So remember these four things, right? So we can either take about the audience, the behavior, the condition, and the degree. You can, if you have the slides open, you can flip back to the other ABCD, right?
As for the similarities and the differences, depending on what you have in front of them, among items and settings. Which one?
Just different parts.
What do you think?
The company.
Yeah,
I think it depends on like what they have in front of them too. Like distinguishing the difference. For sure now. So. What do you think about the sort items by common attributes?
That was still organized.
Sorting strategies.
Kind of similar to the scribe.
Mm-hmm. What did you guys talk about common attributes?
Common attribute. I don't think
Wasn't that lesson one?
the beginning was about the
Discriminate or select relevance activities such as journals, diaries, and comments, product reviews, studies required students. So could be evaluating,
with just the numbers.
Could be. Could be evaluating too.
I didn't really.
All right, so
Mhm.
who's our audience for all of these?
Students.
The kindergarten students, or the students, right? So. Okay. And so let's think about the first one. Describe similarities. So the students will describe similarities and differences among items in the set. What is missing from that? What do we think? This, right? Like, how are they gonna do that? So what are they gonna use, right? So the students, or we could even say, using counting bears, the students will describe similarities, differences among the sets of bears or something, right? So this piece, right, this kind of condition piece. So, right, the things they're going to use, right? The conditions that will be imposed in order to demonstrate. Right, these resources, the environment, the directions are going to be provided. And so this piece, right, is kind of the context in which that objective is going to happen, what they're going to use to demonstrate that. So let's go back. Does that make sense? So yeah, we might say the students will describe similarities and differences among items in a counting bear set or something, right? Or using the counting bear set. Like, we want to show that like they're actually doing something. What did you all come up with for that one? Right, so this is our A. This is our C. This is our B, and all. Right. Right, so we see that this is relates to the A, B, C. D. It doesn't need to be in this order.
That's what I was gonna tell you.
Yes.
You did go to condition and then came out.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be written in this way. It just needs to be there in some way. They can be in different orders. Right, so what else did you come up with? Did you come up with other ways to make this better?
Students will be able to discuss.
Yeah, so discussing, yeah, so maybe that's like they're doing some kind of small group and they'll be able to discuss and then. So the thing right with the objective is then think about the assessment. Cool. That a little bit today. So when we think about a verb like discuss, what are your measures of learning? How do you know that they've discussed something well? It's fine, they can discuss, that's an important collaborative skill, right? To be able to talk about similar. Sure, so maybe you want to say that they will discuss using, so you know, maybe you know what it's gonna be, maybe it's like using the right color names or size words, right? Like whatever that is, right? So maybe then you're looking for those kinds of things. They're able to use that vocabulary and discuss that vocabulary well. Right, when we say describe, we can, how would we measure that? How would we measure if our students were describing the similarities between? Visual. Right? So the ingredients, sure. The colors of the package, right? So they might describe that they are different. Okay. So that's one attribute, the color of the package. So an attribute is essentially just a way to describe something, right? A characteristic of an object. The yellow, bigger, small. Those are ways of describing things. So right, so okay, but one is green and one is blue. So they're describing the difference.
It's bigger than.
One is bigger than the other. Yeah.
One soft, one chewy.
One is yeah,
crunchy.
one is soft and chewy and one is crunchy. Yeah,
They're healthy.
yeah, they can be healthy.
They're granola.
They're both granola bars, so they're the same in that way.
Picture.
Yeah, they both have pictures. Right, so these are all attributes of these two granola bars, right? And these are ways that students and us just now describe the differences and similarities between a set of things, and a set is just a group of things that's the same, right? Or that share some common something, right? And so we did it with granola, right? What else? How about the next one?
To do with color, for example.
Yep, so the students will use the counting bears to sort and sort by color.
It could be by size if they were different.
Yeah, it could be, yeah, right, yeah.
Then there's bigger ones and then there's.
Yeah, so
smaller
there's, I
ones.
think we have some, yeah, where they're like different sizes.
Maybe it could be like how many too, like depending if they're not the same.
Well, we could, so I like where you're going. That's true. No. Sure. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, you can sort sets into anything. You can create a similar set of things that's soft and something crunchy or rough or whatever, right? You can go outside and take a nature walk and select stuff and then come back and sort it, right? By a common attribute. That common attribute can be anything that your class decides is common among them. If they're smooth, right? If they're bumpy, soft or hard, right? And so how do we measure that? So sorting is fine. Sorting is an observable thing. You can watch a student sort these bears by color.
Favorite convention?
Right, so we can just watch, we can observe, right? That's one form of assessment. We can take good notes, right? And say, well, Gladys is able to sort by color every time she passes, right? Yeah, so sorting is this is just an easy thing you can observe. Having them describe similarities and differences, you can listen to their descriptive language, how they're comparing things, and you can measure that, right? With something, checklist, notes.
And I think it's best when you observe the little ones, because then you can get a better feeling of, oh, he's not understand. Like my son with purple and blue, he can't distinguish those. But I know, very interesting. And I think it's you get a better grasp at that, and then you can support.
Yeah, with young children, observing is always going to be your go-to assessment tool. And you're going to be watching them all the time. You're going to watch them do tasks all the time.
I don't think they can notice really well, right? As a teacher, is able to connect to differential level.
Yeah.
The teacher, the like I also she was thinking, that when they look at it, they, when they happen to, someone that's took a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be really important for you to just have a notebook. And and you'll take an assessment class here, so you'll get other types of assessment. In my previous class, I talk about assessment specific to math and science and social studies, so. Yeah, but I think, young children, just observing them as they're doing all these things is gonna help you decide, right? And how you might group them for activities, what kinds of support they need. Yeah, and thinking about, right, helping them and supporting, like scaffolding that learning before you have some kind of final assessment, right? Where they have to do some activity or an assessment with a school or something, right? Okay, how about the last pair sort of set?
And we said we call this, students would compare how they sorted their program years, but I was debating on putting the students that take it, that they compare and justify. So if you're asking them, why did you sort it, like they have to justify why they did it. Oh, it's because it's purple, and it's because it's bigger than the other. Either put compare and justify.
Yeah, so I think, right, I like that as like an added one or like an and, because, right, so I think this is saying that, the teachers want the children to be, the students to be able to compare the different ways in which they've sorted there, right? So maybe you're doing like a small group. Okay. Yeah, and so then, right, and so maybe, yeah, you're saying, okay, how did, right? So your classmate, right? You sort theirs. How is it different from yours? Right? Or maybe you go around and say, how did you sort your set? Tell me why you did that. So what do you notice about these three objectives in terms of like the level of beliefs? Well, I think they actually build on each other, kind of, right? So like describing something and then they actually have to apply that by doing something, right? And sorting. So they need to understand attributes and what makes something the same or different. And then they do the thing, the task, so they're applying that knowledge. And then they're comparing, right? They're kind of or justifying even, right? They're doing these kind of like analyzing. They're looking at different sets, they're comparing those sets. So it kind of builds on, clearly makes sense. And that's, I'm sure, what the curriculum writing groups at CPS were intending to do and different. Yeah. Objectives. That's a great question. It depends, right? It just depends on your lesson, but I would say just a few. So I would say like this, like 2 or 3 is probably good. You might have an extra one if you have like an integrated content area, if you want to be measuring that too. But the thing too is that like these can all be assessed in like one sitting, right? And you wouldn't do that. You would like observe over time and have them do this activity over time. But these are all essentially things you could do while you're all sitting together at your small group time and you're doing fairs or you're walking your collection of things from outside or whatever. That you can kind of achieve all of these in that one activity is also because some might not be as easy. It might be easy to describe how they're different. Same, like starting to find a common attribute and sorting that might be a little bit harder. All right, so does it make sense how this ABCD or ACBD, or whatever order you want to put it in, could be reflected here? Right, so these are okay objectives, right? And they tell us what we would want to measure. They don't tell us this level of detail of how those things are gonna happen. And you know, obviously this seems like kind of redundant, it's just obviously I'm a teacher, so clearly it's going to be the students all the time. But it's just like a good habit, right? Okay, so, well, around the room, there are 4 big post-its like this, so, want you to walk around and read. So again, these are all lesson objectives for all lessons, part of the bigger unit on the CPS diagram as well. There's you can read through them, you can rewrite them using the ABCD rule. Think about travel along with your blues taxonomy. Think about where that level is, and can you think about how to level up that objective, right? Write it in a different way, or add a new objective that creates that next level if it's not already there. Yeah, so we'll just take some time to do a little gallery walk, so everyone can just get up and go to wherever they want to start. Just take your pen and just write on the page of it, and then we'll come back and we'll go around the room with everyone. So there's one right back here. Which one? Yeah. Here. Yeah. Yeah, just write on the big post-it. And you don't have to like rewrite each one, just whatever you're feeling drawn to. You know, you write as a teacher writing a learning plan or the yes.
That's a science term.
And that's. These are all. These are all. No, so yeah, so you can go to other ones too. You guys can rotate, y'all can rotate around and see other ones and maybe if one group has covered one of the objectives, you can try to imagine the next one. So yeah, you can move around. Well, they're all kindergarten. I think I made them all. Yes. What do you think? Yeah, I'm starting to read them now, so. Yeah, so just pop over to somewhere else. Let's take like a few more minutes. We'll do maybe one more, kind of write down one more and then we'll come back. All right, so wrap up what you're writing down and go, you can go back to the seat and we'll walk around and we'll discuss. Okay, so let's start here. Okay, so this was a sign. So this says science the objective as scientists sort of things into groups to help understand how they observe plants and animals are living things. Scientists use different ways to study the world. Scientists look for patterns and then make observations about the world. So, up here. So students will use a size chart to sort different types of leaves by their size. Students will be able to differentiate living things and non-living things with an anchor chart. Students will be able to categorize different types of plants outdoors. Students will be able to study the world by looking at picture books. Okay, so thoughts on this. So we have. Got that down. Perfect. Good job. How about behavior? So differentiate, words, categorize, study the world. How do we measure that? That's the condition. Okay, let's go back to this. Okay. So how about the condition for these? So students use a size chart. Size chart, so what's that? The students will be able to differentiate the anchor chart, categorize different types of plants outdoors. Right, so this is, so if we think about kind of expanding, right? This is essentially the behavior, right? This is the behavior. This is the. Right? So. Yeah, so this one is missing. Condition. How about this one? Does this one have? Or- I would say looking at picture book in the condition. So this will be able to, right? This is what we want the action to be, right? Like, what are they going to be able to do? What is the thing they're gonna demonstrate? So. So if our objectives are here, that we were kind of rewriting or adding to. So that scientists use different ways to study the world. So that's the one. Students will analyze the world. Oof, I don't know. I don't know. You do that in kindergarten. Be real long and they're not gonna know what is happening.
Mhm.
All right, so.
That would be, wouldn't that be like, it would be good, like, if they're walking them out there outside? As a, like, picture books.
So I think, let's think about this. So scientists use different ways to study the world. So what we want students to learn with that objective is that scientists study the world in all different ways. Right? So really it's about them learning about what scientists do. Right? So actually these are terrible.
They are.
It's really, I'm like, I need to understand more about that curriculum development. Some are great and some are like, what's in there? That's just like what they're gonna learn. And, right, so we want them to learn that scientists use different ways to study it. So that would be through observation, talking to people, experiments, right? So I think, yeah, this is really about thinking about science. How about this one? So this one is tricky for us. How about thinking about the condition? So students will be able to categorize different types of plants. So we already have the behavior. Right, so what are they gonna use? What is that condition in which they're going to be able to categorize these things? How do you think picture? Sure. So students will be able to use picture books. Picture books. Right. Okay. All right, is this clear? How we're kind of getting to, okay, let's try. All right, this is social science. Keep in mind, my community. I can listen to respond to questions. So I can listen and respond to questions about a story using the hand raising routine. I can actively engage in group reading activities with purpose and understanding. I can share my ideas by speaking and writing. I can write or draw all about it. So so the students will read a story and will be able to summarize the main idea. The students will be able to tell about the event by writing. Okay, so we got it. We got it now. Solid. All right, how about the behavior? So summarize. So summarize the main ideas. This is the thing we want them to do. How about conditions? I'll read the story. I'll read the story. By reading a story, we'll be able to measure the big summarize. Yeah. Okay. How about this one? Behavior. To tell about the event. Is there maybe a better descriptive word? Describe. Event. This is our right. And the condition, right, is if you either write it or draw. Great. Nice differentiated way. Try to get, I know, I've noticed that a lot. When my students are writing that. We'll be able to. No, just, take it. Okay. So, listen, getting along with others. Explore how people solve problems. That's how we can get along with one another. And ways people can solve problems and write a sentence about and draw. So the students will discuss how to get along with one another. Students will role play and use to get along with each other in secret ways. That students will be able to demonstrate a partner or getting along by writing a sentence, drawing, listen to the story about. Okay. This one will discuss. Yeah. How to get along. So this is the whole thing exactly. Condition. What? Right, so the condition is the things they'll use. So we can combine it. Yeah, so be right in the story. Read, listen.
It'd be like after reading a story.
The after reading the story. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, I will cover this. So the students will role play ways to get along with each other. We think role play is really different. So to me, it's more that like, the role playing way to get along is what?
The
The
condition.
condition, right? That is. What is like, what are they demonstrating? What is the thing we're gonna measure? They'll do this. This will.
Recall or.
Yeah, something like some kind of demonstration of. Like skills or dispositions that you would see. When you go, so. Like that, right? Well, for students. Um. Skills needed to get along.
By role.
Right? So here, you can measure them demonstrating those things, particularly with role. Okay, all right. All right, what's in a name? Sort items by specific attributes. So this is math again. Count the number of letters in the name using the correct sequence. Recognize that the last number counted is a middle number. Students will be able to sort names from shortest to longest. Students will analyze the number of letters in a person's name. Students will be able to recognize the last number counted. Students will identify how many letters there are in their passage. 100%. Okay. Behavior. Sort. Okay. Students will sort. We're gonna need a condition.
Using the roster. Using the roster. The class roster.
Right? Student names, right? Students will be able to sort. They'll recognize the last.
Students will recognize
They'll recognize
last.
the total.
So so what's the C? Students will
So we probably want that to be something.
recognize.
Probably not. Right? So student, I would say that using unified students, right?
Students
will count and recognize that the last number counted is the same. This is semester. Learn all about this, right? Work together. Okay, does that make sense now? It's like some practice, so. Oh yeah, it's, it's tricky. You have to really be thinking about them and, you know, luckily you'll have some of those things already created for you, right? And so, but you can obviously see that it could be elaborated on and to differentiate by creating new objectives for students that might already be achieving, right? All right, so assessment. We're not going to talk a ton about assessment today because we have a whole class dedicated to talking about assessment, and then you, so class here in 301, but also you will have a whole assessment course in this program. So, and we will also talk about assessment in basically every class. So we want to assess, like we were saying, a learning all the time, right? Especially in early childhood, it's really important that, you know, we get to know our students and where they're at, how they learn, right? So these kind of more authentic assessment techniques, right, is how we refer to them. That these are just embedded in all the things that you do. And so these are, you know, could be formative, right? They could be kind of the in-between, right? These more authentic techniques where you're walking around with your notebook and notes and observing what students are doing. Right, and then there's summative, right? So this is like, you have a teacher-made test or exit tickets, right? These kinds of things are things you'll use and you'll learn about also. A project, right? So maybe your students make a presentation. Well, they can do those things in first, second grade, or in kindergarten with scaffolding. Right, so those are all those kind of summative, right? The things at the end that really tell us that they've met, right, all of these. And we're checking all the time because we want to make sure that we're on track. We don't want to just leave to the end and be like, oh, little Johnny just didn't get it. We never checked the whole way. We were doing this whole unit for 3 weeks and we never did any assessment, right? So we're not going to do that to our kids. We're going to assess them all. And we're going to provide them individualized scaffolding as they need it. We'll use blended learning models, we'll have stations to support that in different ways too. So then, how do we measure these things? Wrote these great objectives, we got our what are we gonna do? So how are they gonna demonstrate? So students will use a slide chart to sort different types of leaves by their size. What is an assessment that you might do? So just think about, we'll write a wrong. Make sure we have our lesson. So what's that look like? So I got my kindergarten. The size chart, sort leaves. What do I have them do? What does that look like? That assessment. Of course, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That each big ask them, we have to be blank, but ask them, which one's the smallest, biggest, have them individually and be able to point it out, not just like, as a classroom, you know, them individually, or like being able to. Right. But they're sorting, right? So they have to do stuff. They're not just pointing at stuff. Yeah, they have to think they're gonna move it around. Yeah. Sure. You could even do that like when they gotta line up to go to their special class. Like, okay, and then Olivia, come on, I need you to show me the thing. You get it? Cool. And then line up, right? And I know if you get it right or wrong, right? Or what you need help with. So maybe this is the in-between assessment, right? Yeah, that works.
I would have them all do it like as a group, individually, and have their own like laminated sheet perhaps. Maybe.
Sure.
And then just kind of, I think I would start with those that I think are still struggling
Mm-hmm.
to support them a little. And I just kind of walk around to it. Like, right now.
Yeah, so maybe they're all sitting at their tables in your class, right? And they have their laminated sheet. The laminator is the teacher's best friend. We love the laminator. And yeah, they're doing it on their own. You're walking around.
Because it is good to do it. It's like when you're doing your small group to do it, but like it is really time consuming.
Yeah, the individualized thing is hard. That's why teachers always go to the test, right? They always say, here, or here's this work.
I feel like individualized would be something other lesson like sizes, like, okay, but like, if they were to do a lesson, the roles of that, that'd probably be like individualized.
Right.
But like, I feel like the pastoral lesson means something to do as a group with things like sizing, especially when.
Right. Yeah, and I think, right, like you can have many different assessments assessing this objective, right? And then you can have something at the end that's kind of an assessment of all of it. And it could just be like a little exit ticket where they're on their little Chromebooks, they're answering some questions maybe. Or maybe they create some kind of science journal, right? And then they handed it at the end of that lesson. That's where it's at. And obviously right, a part of assessment is having rubrics, checklists, right? Standards at which you're assessing. It's not just this arbitrary thing like, oh, I really like this is great. You get 100%, right? There has to be some standardization, and so you'll learn. We'll talk a little bit about it, but right, because I think the second question, right, you really think about like what is sufficient evidence that students have learned. Is it that they can like regurgitate something on a test? Is it that they can apply that learning in some other context or some other activity? Right, so you'll have to be thinking about all of these things, right? Thinking about what is sufficient for you in being able to measure whether or not they got this. And then it'll all matter too when you think about, right, how it all rolls up to the bigger unit, right? And the bigger desired results, right? You always got to go back to that. Like, is this going back to these unit objectives? Are they getting it? Are they going to be able to like on to the next thing, right? Do they have enough learning that they're going to be able to do the next unit and the next lesson? Right? That's what's going to be important. And they're not all going to be like A+++, they're all be 100%. If some are gonna be, 80%, 70%. But you note that, and then you find ways to help that student continue to support those skills and those objectives in other ways, right? As you're kind of moving the whole class forward. Because you're not gonna just stay here because you have a few students who aren't, 100%. You gotta move it, right? You gotta do all this. So you have to find ways to bring those students along with you. It might be blended learning models where you're mixing your groups. You have these students who got all that stuff last time really well. They're supporting those skills that those students bring with them yet, right? They're helping. Or it's you differentiating your instruction, that you have your own time with those students, supporting those skills, and scaffolding the nuance. You're still teaching the same content that all the classes learn, but you're reinforcing those other skills that they didn't for the last class, right? All right, what else? All right, they'll read the story and they'll summarize the main ideas. What would we do there? What's the assessment? What does it look like? What am I grading? So we want to know how they've read. So there's some comprehension, right? But we will learn out in the way that they summarize. And what's the product? What's the thing the student does that they give to me that I grade? Yeah, what is that? What is that? Sure. The second one is drawing, right? So they,
For the first one, I would summarize, I would have them, what happened at the beginning, what happened in the middle.
they write 3 sentences for each sentence, right? They write one sentence for the beginning, one sentence to the middle, one sentence to the end. Then maybe they draw. Right. Yeah, so that's the product, right? The assessment is also the thing they give us, the thing that we grade, that they use, that they do in class, right? That we scaffold and support them on, not just doing this alone. Walking around, right, checking them out.
But then you think about it, and some won't be able to summarize on paper or draw a picture. So it's like, what do you do with those?
Great, what do we do with those kids?
You say, well, I would.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do we do with
Yeah,
those?
go ahead. What do we do?
I think I would just let them verbally tell me, and I will kind of what they tell.
This is a great way, a great differentiation approach, right? That we're allowing the student to tell us what they learned in multimodal ways. They can tell us, especially like English language learners, they might not be able to write things down in the way that we think they should, and but they can maybe verbalize it better.
Or if they don't speak the language, you know.
Or you can
Have
do it in their home
their
language.
language.
Yes, right.
Native
You
language.
can do the assessment now.
Like, that activity, you separate them into groups, like, so you can like tell the kids like, okay, whoever wants to draw a picture describing it, this group, whoever wants to write it, this group, whoever wants to speak about it, and after that, sit the kids at one time, because then you'll have like something on paper to evaluate the kids.
I think it's a great station-based that you could do them all
Mhm.
and have them rotate through all of those things.
Mhm.
Because then you have 3 different measures of how well this student is meeting this objective. Right? I mean, because maybe they can say it really well and they can draw it really well, but they're writing it. And this tells us something important.
Mhm.
Tells them we need to work on how they write, right?
Practice styles.
Right. Yeah, so creating like these kind of station activities that provide both activities that support their learning, right? It's helping them think about the story and their reading comprehension and what they took away and demonstrating that in different ways. So they're still kind of learning in that, but it's also your way of assessment. And so this is also a great way to assess, is having embedded assessments that are just the activities that they're doing, right? It's not this like, okay, we just finished this lesson. I want you to take out your Chromebooks and do this exit ticket. That's intentionally, flash quiz or whatever, right? Which is fine, because you're gonna need those kinds of things too. But these embedded assessments are gonna be really, really helpful for the objectives you're actually measuring and for other kinds of things, right? That you might, right, their penmanship. Oh boy. These. Good luck. Yeah, just right. Good luck reading their stuff. Penmanship is gonna be a fun thing to work on. Right, but this is like, you can work on fine motor, holding pencil, and all of those things while you're having them do this. Working on their oral language skills while they're telling you the story. Integrating art and creativity by having them draw. Right, so you've just thought about all kinds of different domains of learning, which we haven't even got to yet in this class, but we will. Right, when you create a unit plan, you're gonna be thinking about all of those things. You're gonna be thinking about the physical domain, and how do we integrate that into our units and our lessons, and yeah, maybe it's for fine motor. We get all these like little papers, line that got those gigantic pencils, big pencils. I love this.
It worked though.
I know, I think you're right. Right, so if you're thinking about all the domains, the social domain, we're having them work together, right? Art, the aesthetic domain, creativity, and including that. So, great, you all are on the right track. All right, so does this all make sense? This little brief intro to kind of assessment and thinking about what's important about our objectives and pulling from them the kind of assessment. What is it that we're assessing? Right, we're assessing essentially behavior, right? Within this kind of condition. And then there's a product. There's something the student will give you or do, or you'll observe that you will then measure the degree at which they're doing the thing, right? Cool. Differentiate. Right, cool, good, yeah, we got it, thumbs up if we're feeling like we're awesome, great, great. Okay, so here's like a full example of like using backward design and what this might look like. Right, so our desire is always described and compared. Real big, right? There's all kinds of things that are underneath there. The standard here, classify objects in given categories, count the numbers of objects, categories, sort the categories. So from the Common Core standards, that's what Illinois uses for most everything except for science. So no, the objectives are all going to be different. The standards are what, if you're a school in Illinois, these are the standards that you need to demonstrate that your students are, right? And standards and objectives are going to be super aligned, right? So I always think like, so when you start writing lesson plans, always look at the standards first. Because don't be creating lessons and activities for like, I don't know, a second grader standard if your lesson wants to be about for kindergarten. Right? So look at this, always start with the standard. I always see this where students will create lessons, they want to talk about the life cycle of the butterfly, whatever, right? And this is like not even a thing that technically students learn until like second grade or something. It's like, and then we teach this in preschool, like, right? Teach these ideas at a very somewhat superficial level, right? Right, but right, show them the stages, do all the bring the butterfly thing, right? We want to introduce all these things at a very young age. We don't have to start thinking about like the systems the things that are happening in a scientific way until much later, right? So if you're doing a lesson for like kindergarten, standards for kindergarten for next generation science standards are not going to have that. So just make sure you're starting. We'll talk about it. But always start with the standards. Then you can think about your objectives and your assessments, right? So all of these things, alignment, all have to be aligned. You need to be able to relate back to my standard, make sure this objective is related to some learning that needs to happen here. And this to relate to this, right? So this is just like a form assessment for an document what's going on. You guys use a checklist, right? Okay, we've done stop, sort those things by color, size. Right, so then you think about the right. You've got your first two steps of backward design. Now we think, how are we going to teach that? Right? We know that we are going to do a station, right? Of the, summarizing the main ideas. Well, then we know the activities probably some kind of station rotation activity where students are maybe with the teacher, a teacher-led station, and they're going to give us their spiel, summarize those in spiel. Right, then the next station, they're gonna be doing their drawings, right? They're gonna have paper and paper, paint, I don't know, whatever you wanna have, right? And then the next station, they're gonna have all of their writing stuff. They're gonna write down the meaning. Right, so that's how you're, well, one, you're gonna read the story, or you're gonna let them read the story. Maybe you read the story first and then they read the story independently. Then you can go to the guidance. If you're reading the story many times, right? So these are then all the activities that you're gonna do. It's easier to plan all the activities when you know what you need to measure, right? When you know what you want them to learn. Okay. All right, so I want us to start practicing writing a lesson. And this for your key assessment of this class, with the hand in the long lesson plan. Went over. Sweet. Anything else? Like one thing? I think it's a weird slide. I think we did. All right, so what I did is I made a kind of modified version of that. It's essentially all the same sections that are in the long lesson plan, but I pulled them out in a way that is more aligned with backwards. So if you go into there's that into the slots, this link here, you can open up the practice template. So it's just a view only. So just make a copy and put it in your drive. So this is a practice. So it looks similar. Um, so the one thing that that's the so this stuff is the first piece in your class. Who are your students, right? How big is your class? What are the you have a mix of students, some special needs students, 5P, 504 plans, right? What's the makeup of your class? But this context is really important to understand when planning a lesson. And I need to know that, you know, I have 5 English language learners in my class. And so they're going to require maybe a different kind of support or some differentiation as you're still learning English, right? So I need to know that in this context, right? So that's what kind of goes. Make the write your own something. Right, so the desired result is what we talked about. It's like, what's the big thing? What do I want them to demonstrate or know, right? The end of next introduction. The big, after all this. Okay. Our curriculum standards, right? So those are the standards, like we were just talking about, state standards. So this is, we're going to practice writing a preschool lesson for the next several weeks. We'll kind of work on this. And so we will actually use the Illinois Early Learning Standards. So those are different. The Common Core and Next Generation Science Standards, social science, those are all data. But the Illinois Early Learning Standards are specific for preschool. So we'll use those. And then your learning objectives, right? So, talk about. your assessment, so we just talked about that, how that's aligned. So this is just like a basic checklist that you might use as an authentic assessment piece. You just walk around, right? Whatever. And that's it for this one, right? So we're just gonna unpack this. So I want you to take time now to just practice writing. It can be any lesson you want. So go to the Illinois Early Learning Standards. Close up. Yeah, we're doing preschool here. They're different, yeah. Yep, so here are the preschool Illinois Early Learning Standards. And so these include all the standards for every content area. Um, but yeah, this is where it starts. So this is language arts, right? So this is English language arts. This is reading, writing, oral language, speaking and listening. There are standards for all of these things. And there's math, and you can explore it. So start thinking about like what kind of lesson would you want to do for preschool? So take some time. You can work in groups if you want to chat with your neighbors. It could be any big English language arts, math, science, social science. So just explore the standards, the Illinois Early Learning Standards, and then think about your class, right? What does your preschool classroom look like? What's that context like? How many students do you have? What's that makeup? Is it mixed kids in school? Is it 3 and 4-year-olds? Just 4-year-olds? What's that like? Standards are really like kids, eating. Yeah. So this is our time to practice. So let's, just start, writing stuff so we can practice, and then next week we'll add more to this. And we'll look at, maybe we'll actually take some time to share it with each other, provide feedback. Right, the point of this exercise is that we're practicing together how to write a lesson so that when we go to write our key assessment long lesson, there's no issues. We know exactly what we should be doing. That lesson will be different, right? Because it'll be for a K-2. So you use different standards, and we'll talk more about standards too. So that's clear, because Common Core is like okay to read. Next generation science standards gets a little wild. So we'll take some time to look. And if you want to share your practice lessons with me, I can look at them too, so I can give you feedback as we're working on. There'll be another one for next week that we use. How's it going? Standard. I think, yeah, if you want, yeah, you can start with kind of one standard that gets you going. And then if you see that, your ideas or your objectives and things are getting like more broad, you can always go back and see if there's like another standard to that alignment there if you want to add it. But yeah, starting with one there's a lot. So yeah, so these are all the standards. Actually, yeah, so this is the main standard, and then what they do is they break up there's like other smaller kinds of things, yeah. Mhm. So this is kind of like so this is probably like your big design result, right? And then, yeah, these you can use. Yeah, and then this is kind of big. I would use those standards. Those are gonna be more in detail, right? More
Right, yeah.
refined, right? They're
They
more
make more
narrow, yeah, and you'll be able to build objectives.
Okay.
And with those standards, they align together. Yeah. Has everyone put their standard yet? We just start digging around. Yeah. Again, this is practice. So if you want to next week, be like, I want to just change it up, you can go back and change this stuff and we can build on that. But current ones, Yeah, so the timing. I mean, it depends on what you're doing, right? Cause you can either have like whole group time and then you go off. Yeah, no, it's a. Hour, right? And you're, like working something, but it's not just that sitting. Doing a whole group, right? Reading a book or something, right? And then talk through some concepts or something, and then they go and do activity that's related. Then you come back, maybe and do like closing, talk about what they did. That's related to. Yeah, so for the context, right, your lesson is gonna incorporate all of the, you know, you're gonna do a whole group thing and then you're gonna have some small groups. You can check all those boxes. You don't have to just, your lesson is probably not gonna just one of those things. Yeah, so that's, so where, at what part in that kind of bigger unit is this lesson happening? Is it at the beginning, right? Is it the first lesson that you're teaching that's related to this unit? Do they have some knowledge of this content already, right? So maybe it's kind of in the middle. Is this the like culminating lesson, right? Where they've learned a bunch of things over time, right? There's been many objectives you've been looking at. And now that's kind of the big, right? Yep. Yep, so your content area, right, is going to be whatever the subject is. That's the content that you're teaching. What's not in here, what's in the long lesson plan is the central focus. Right, so that is kind of the concept learning, right? So we'll talk about that. And probably later. Which one? Yep, so yeah, your content is the subject. Right. Oh, girl, that's it's up there. Look at it. But you know what we're doing it in little buckets. So by the time you get. We went over the whole, the long lesson plan. Yeah. So we went through the whole thing. It wasn't in this order. Yeah. This order, I'm trying to get us to think about backward design. But all of these things minus the desired results added are in the one. Plan it this way, should be easier for us. It'll be more manageable. We also are taking it little by little. We won't feel this way by the end, I think. I should we've been trying to get it to you guys for so long.
You should, like, do it, please.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna put this up here, so it's here as a reference, but so the central focus, you'll see on the long lesson plan, and we'll talk again, that'll be in another broken up one, so we can, smaller pieces. This is the kind of the concept learning, right? This is where you say, so they're doing math, and the concept learning is that students are going to know how to count from 1 to 10, right? So it's essentially, it's kind of like your objective, but it's just like a statement, right? This is like where you talk specifically about concepts that are being learned. And we'll work through that. It's like You haven't taken any methods classes yet, right? So you don't even know what the methods are.
The number of students, the number.
Well, so I mean, a preschool class is probably gonna have, I don't know, 10, 12
Yes,
students.
but maybe it isn't supposed to, like, the one that you said that you didn't know.
Yeah.
So, like,
Oh, so then there was definitely, yeah, so it could be a big,
16 in my preschool.
yeah, so it could be more, yeah, I mean, it's, you're gonna have some more people. I'm just trying to think, like, I don't actually know. This, so I don't know what the ratio is for CPF. The ratio with DCF for DCFS is 1 to 10. But if there's an assistant, you can have more. And if it's like public school too, like, I don't know, you know, I don't know if the DCF stuff is that much. This is just like
following it, because I was.
oh yeah, kindergarten.
Kindergarten.
That's a whole other, that's a
Yeah.
whole.
pre-K
You will have kindergarten classes that are in public. In public school. You should have assistants. Though, if you have assistants. Was it Chicago Public?
There's a preschool.
Because the last contract negotiations, they got class sizes dropped to 24. I think. So like, shouldn't have more than 24.
Like, this is the roster, but I don't.
There
have the
used
little
to be 30. I mean, I remember my son's like first grade class size was 30 students. But that changed since the last, I'm pretty sure it's 20. That's still a lot. Isn't it? A lot of people. Yeah. All right, where else are you guys at here?
So, for instance, what are the state standards in like? What if we were demonstrating the standing with each of the response?
Say that again.
Demonstrating the standing with age appropriate responses.
Is that a standard in the, what's it for? Is it for?
English.
Okay. Yeah, that's the standard. I don't have any more than this. Well,
They don't feel very, it's like, how? The principals know, so like, those will know that you're teaching all of the standards.
do you get like handed something when your teacher is like, look up? So you will get like access to the styling film, right? And we'll then just use that to plan. And then there are like beginning of the year assessments that all your students will do, and then there's end of year assessment. In third, sixth, they're taking the state standard test. So those are really the things that you should care about.
I don't know how many students that.
Don't they take it 3 times in the school year? Isn't it the beginning, the middle, and then, because I know we just took the iReady.
So
For the
CPS
older.
is iReady.
And we also do 3-6, start
Oh,
3-6
start secret,
for
yeah.
the little ones.
Right,
Which is what they're doing now.
So maybe there is a mid-year. I thought there was only the 2, but maybe there's a midpoint.
Because my coordinator was telling me that.
Yeah.
So I was like,
So maybe there's that. But yeah, so you're gonna have like these more standardized assessments that CPS uses, and that's likely what your school are gonna do. You will probably have, you know, this is one of the class.
So like Olivia said, there is, like, I have the coordinator, the health coordinator, and she's the one that, and she recently just showed me like every, like the whole school from 3rd to 8th, and she shows like on the papers, and that's how they kind of sort groups and like who needs help and who's CL or
Right.
who's has an IEP or who's the ELL.
Yeah,
you know?
there's probably like a data or the APU or the assistant principal might be that person, right? Or there's some data person that at the district that is helping do those things, because that's how they'll split students by classes, right? Or like your teachers, right? So your grade level team will get like a list at the end of the year, and then you'll have to figure out where they go next year.
I think so, yes, because once we get entered. Basically, I think we got somebody, but it was like, highlights.
Right, they were.
So orange is
super
the
smart
highest.
and these are the dumb. Right.
Yeah, orange was like, you could do stuff independently, you didn't.
Not that
need
any
to
help.
Right.
Green is like, you could do something independently, but you need some assistance. Purple is like.
Right.
Well, like, I need assistance. So it's like, that's how we all got separated, and some people. I don't know if you call it, like, not for like, for me, like, I was in green for math, but I was in orange for science and English.
Yeah.
So it was like, I was separated, this guy was the one separate.
Right, so that's, yeah, so, and that will happen as the students get older. You won't have to worry about that as much in early childhood, because you're just like teaching them all the subjects and you're just thinking about like you're within your class. The way that it will work in those grades, usually in CPS, is that you'll have different types of classrooms, right? So you'll have like an inclusion classroom that will have a mix. There will be a blended class. So you'll have students who have IEPs or English language learners, or students who are like typically
We have two cluster rooms.
right. So you
And
might,
I don't know if they know cluster rooms, but
yeah.
it's something. new
Well, so
too.
clusters are different too, because clusters like special need, like students with severe disabilities usually. So, yeah, so there's actually my son's school, there's two cluster programs, and those are usually going to be very mixed in terms of the age range, the grade level. So it'll be like K to 4 in one cluster class, and then the older kids. But those are all that. So that's special ed. Those are special ed teachers, not gen ed. They're teaching those classes. Lots of like specialized support. Yes, the cluster classrooms, so then inclusion classrooms, we don't have mix. We might have a gen ed class that has just like all gen ed kids, still probably different levels, but no IEPs or 5-4 plans. You might have a bilingual class that has, a bilingual teacher with, different, which will also likely. Just depends on how many kids are at school. School, it'll be different by all the schools. All right, so how are we doing with our,
For example, from the, I'm saying, for example, one focus on identity level.
Mhm.
Another one is focus on aesthetic. So do we have to choose here or?
I would, so I. So what I think is important for the context piece for you all to be thinking about is just what does your class look like, right? Who are these students? Sure, race ethnicity is important, right? We need to think about cultural background. This is certainly an important part of our students and how we will teach them and what we will want to incorporate in our teaching. We also, in addition to that, want to be thinking about extra that our students learn, right? Are there students with IEPs? Are there students that need language support? Both in that maybe they are learning English, but also maybe their language is delayed, right? So there's lots of things that like you can think about for what your class, what's important. I guess what you should be thinking about is like, what's important for me as the teacher to know about my students to ensure that I can support their learning. That's what should go there, right? The context, so the first element. Right, so that's your classroom. That's what you need to know to be able to then plan for them, right? Because as look at the long lesson plan, right, you see there's other sections like differentiation. So it's important that you include in your context, right, that maybe you have, 3 English language learners, you have 2 students with diagnosed ADHD, you have an autism spectrum student, right? You've mixed race ethnicity classroom. Maybe you even think about like, reintroduce lunch, right? Is that something you want to think about, right? So all of these things are really important about your classroom, and then how you will then maybe later think about differentiation of it. I know we all like to think that we're just gonna have 24 kids that are, they're on it. They all can read, they know how to do math, they count to 100, use language really well. They can be. Okay. It's important that we identify those things so we can plan intentionally. What else? Working through. So as you're, working through that, other important things that we need to be considering, right? So the central focus, which I just mentioned, right, is that concept of, right, differentiation of instruction, we're just talking about, which is why it's important that the context is very clear and we've articulated these in our classroom so that we can support those particular needs. Time management, right? Family was asked, like, how long is this lesson, right? And so usually in your school, you will have like a plan, right? Like you'll have 90 minutes for math, and 90 minutes for science, and 90 minutes for social science. They'll have specials that they go to gym, right? They'll have recess, lunch, right? So there'll be some like allotted times for how long you'll have for certain kind of content. So that will help. But for now, right? So we're making it up. Going with the flow. So you'll have to think about that. Like, what is your time? How do I pace this lesson? If this needs to last me an hour, what am I going to do? Right? What is that going to look like? What if kids finish early? What am I going to do with those kids? They could be jumping off the walls. I got to have something planned for them, right? Right? The instructional procedure. What does an actual lesson look like? What is the play-by-play? How is this gonna look when I do it? The material. What are all the things I need to have when we do it, right? Supplies, the text, the videos I'm gonna show, is it some music things incorporate? I'll make a plan for speaking engagement, specifically thinking about like what will they do as individuals? What will they do collaboratively? What is the active piece of this? Right? We're not going to just have them all sitting at their desks or at their books. Right? You have to think about all of those strategies. So that's all the other things that we'll continue to work on for lessons. So that's all in the longest. Okay. But there's also these things you'll have to think about in your classroom. It's non-instructional time, right? Like when they come in the morning, right? Yeah, you gotta be easier. The door. Right. You see those videos like handshake with their student. Want to do that special handshake, teacher? Do it. Okay? Right? They're gonna. What's that routine you're gonna set for them? They're gonna give them their high five. They're gonna put their backpacks away. They're gonna bring their little breakfast, right? Sit down. They're gonna put their homework folder somewhere. Take their homework out, put it in the thing. Right. I think yeah, they're gonna get ready for their day. What does that look like? Right? And you don't need to write this in your lesson, but these are just like part of the curriculum and instruction time that you. So yeah, morning meeting, what's that look like? What do you do in the morning? Right, a lot of social emotional learning is happening during morning meetings, so CPS has an SEL curriculum now they use. So you do that a lot at the time at the morning meeting. We get to talk about feelings, what's the today, weather, day, set the routines. especially early on, right? That's like gonna be a lot of that. Transitions. How am I gonna get my kids to the line to go to the bathroom? What am I gonna do with them when they're all waiting in line to go to the bathroom? So that my class isn't the class in the hallway, like screaming, bouncing up and down, right? So all of those things, right, are part of your day and the things you'll have to plan. And they'll become routine, right? Students will learn them, so that's why it's really important that you establish those early. Right, you're wrapping up at the end of the day with that. How do they know if they have homework? Right? You have to put some, they got to tell their parents something. Gotta bring them a paper, get it signed. Right, what are all those kind of things that might happen at the end of the day? Theory of practice, right? This is like the piece that I think most of you hate. Right? Having to dig deep into your understanding of like the theoretical ideas and what that then looks like in practice. And so these two pieces actually are part of the right, you'll write a lesson rationale. We'll talk about that, what makes a good one. That's like, why do I do this? And then the application of theory, right? And thinking about like, are there theoretical ideas about teaching and learning or children's development that are supporting the way I'm teaching this lesson? Like if I'm doing stations, maybe I'm doing some Vygotskian approaches, and I'm using scaffolding at the teacher station, supporting students with problems, asking questions. Maybe I'm modeling social learning theory, right? I'm doing whole group intro, I'm modeling what it is that we're gonna do in this next activity, then they're gonna go do independent theory. Right, so pulling in all those ideas and thinking about, you know, again, thinking intentionally about like this particular lesson that I'm writing right now, what is the best instructional strategy? How is that supported by ideas about being and learning in children's development? And it's not always going to be the same, right? Maybe you have something that's more just you modeling something and then they just do it right back to you and then they don't go do anything else until later on. Or maybe you have mixed level groups, right? And they're doing some kind of scaffolding for each other. Right? But it'll depend on your activities. But it's important, it's still important. It's important that we understand why we're doing something, what has influenced that decision, and likely that's coming from some theoretical ideas about teaching and learning. We'll talk all about all of these things. We're going to come back to our list. How's everyone feeling about right now, where you're at? Helpful? Good? Freaking out? Okay. Working through it together. All right. We're gonna wrap up. You can keep working on those. Like I said, next week we'll add some more elements and we can keep working on this. You know, these elements here. The next week is 5. So we're gonna keep talking about planning. We're gonna start thinking about like our classroom environment and classroom management. So all those kind of the transitional things, those are good classroom management. We're gonna finish our lesson plan practice and go through those. And then just coming up, so week 6, we won't have class that week, and we'll have a little online quiz. And then your starting review of curriculum models is due week 8. So you can those out. Working on that. In your brain, thinking about it. It's on the list somewhere in your computer, on your notebook. All right, any questions? How are we feeling about all of this? Give me the this, or this. It's a good thing you're gonna want to use with your kids. All right, we got a lot of these little sideways. We're gonna get good. We're gonna get. I'm like in between. All right, we're gonna
Going
get
up,
these
though.
to here. I promise you. We have so many more weeks to do it, so you're all good. You're on your way. These are great. Already. You're doing good stuff. All right. Well, I will see you all next week, and let's keep this party going. Things are exciting. Oh, I know. I know you. Oh, that's probably. So some of the standards are still not, right? No, for those you might have standards that right? Depends on what. Yeah, so you can have, so when you look at it, then you can hold it back into the file. You can look at the like standards on this. Yeah, you can see like there's multiple standards. They're not very. Yeah. They should all, I mean, they might all be related. Right, so this, right, so like specifically the definition. Right, so that's what it is. Yeah, right, so those are all. Yeah. Or you say, right, so that's how you then think about your objectives. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? So maybe they're just doing some basic, or they're driving, right? Then they're comparing the drafting, and then they're applying, right, by using measurements, right? Uh-huh. Oh, sure, yeah. Good luck.
Yes, Mandy, if you're interested, I have the phone already. I just have to share it over and then we can start. But I grabbed it from Snap. So we can just like edit what's on there and then just put in.
Yeah.
Okay?